1. Location Nepal. Timure, 8:55 a.m. Before anything else, this video is about a disaster that is still unfolding. Rescue teams are still in the valley, families are still waiting, and the numbers you hear here will be out of date by the time you watch. To everyone in Nepal, and to everyone with someone missing there, we are sorry, and we are with you. We made this video with the help of a friend of the channel who lives in Kathmandu. Some of what follows is not from a report, it is from him. Wednesday, August 26, 2026, a little before 9 in the morning. Timure, a border village in Rasuwa district, on the road to the Chinese crossing at Rasuwa Gadi. It has not rained in 24 hours. The river is where it always is. The chief customs officer feels the ground shake and thinks it is an earthquake. He runs outside and sees a wall of water coming down the valley, trailing what looks like a plume of smoke, heading for the Timure Bazaar. There is no siren. There is no text message. There is nothing. By about 5 to 9, Timure is gone. 2. What the mountain did. Here is the preliminary picture from Nepal's Disaster Authority and the mountain scientists at ICMOD in Kathmandu, and it is still preliminary. At 8:37 that morning, seismographs recorded what the U.S. Geological Survey first reported as a magnitude 4.4 earthquake near the border. The customs officer in Timure thought it was an earthquake. So did the USGS. About 7 minutes later, a security camera at the crossing recorded the water arriving. Then the USGS looked again and withdrew the earthquake. There was none. What the seismographs had picked up was the collapse itself, a mass of ice and rock, on a glacier on the Nepal side of the Lehende, coming off the mountain from around 5,000 meters and hitting the valley floor with the energy of a magnitude 5.2 quake. It fell into the Lende about 20 kilometers above the border. It did not flow through. It blocked the river, water piled up behind it, and then the blockage let go. Downstream on the Trishuli, one gauge recorded the river rising 9 meters in half an hour. 9 meters. The surge picked up mud, rock, and everything in its path, and hit Timure with nothing in between. So the ground shaking that the customs officer felt was not a warning of what was coming. It was what was coming. By the time anyone in Timure could have understood that, they had 7 minutes. 3. The river with a siren. Now the detail that this whole video turns on. Nepal has a flood siren system. It has had one since 2010. 5 sensors near a friendship bridge. Sirens at 4 points along the river. 5 to 8 minutes of warning for the villages below. It was paid for by a hydropower company. It works. It stands on the Bhotekoshi and Sindupalchok district, about 100 kilometers east of Rasuwa, a different river with the same name. The Bhotekoshi that flooded on Wednesday has hydropower too. 6 stations were knocked out in one morning, including Rasuwa Gadi, Chilame, and the Trishuli plants, most of them state-linked. Our friend in Kathmandu checked for us with people from the area, and the answer was simple. There are no warning sensors on this river. None. The sirens exist. They are on the wrong Bhotekoshi. 4. 13 months. If Wednesday had been the first time, that would be an oversight. It was not the first time. On July 8, 2025, a lake that had formed on top of a glacier about 35 kilometers upstream, inside Tibet, burst. The water came down the same Bhotekoshi, took the friendship bridge at Rasuwa Gadi with it, wrecked a dry port that was still being built, and killed at least 9 people. The response was diplomatic. Within weeks, Nepal and China agreed to share real-time information on floods and landslides across the border, and to flag glacial lakes that might burst. It was a sensible agreement. It was never signed. When Nepal's foreign minister visited China in May 2026, it came up again. It was still not signed on the morning of August 26. A former head of Nepal's Disaster Authority said afterward that floods from the Chinese side had caused problems before, and the issue was never taken seriously enough. 13 months between the 2 floods. No sensor on the river. No signature on the paper. 5. How the warning actually traveled. So how did people find out? This is the part from our friend. He learned about the flood on Facebook, not from an alert, not from the radio. Videos from the border, posted by people who were there. That is how much of Nepal learned about it, in the first hour, while the water was still moving. Downstream it was better. In Nuwakot and around Trishuli Bazaar, people got SMS warnings, and the local police went through the streets with loudspeakers. Towns further down saw the news on social media and moved. The government's official alert went out to the wider region too. It came from the Flood Forecasting Division, and it said, in full, a massive flood is entering the Bhotekoshi from the direction of Tibet. Residents along the Trishuli, as far down as Mughal, are requested to remain in safe locations and stay on high alert until further notice. That is the whole warning. Read the timestamps. The message itself dates the flood to 9:35 in the morning. By then, Timure had been gone for 40 minutes. The message was sent at 10:07. 72 minutes after Timure, 32 minutes after the government's own clock started, and by the time it reached a phone in Kathmandu, the water was already in Nuwakot. Timure had had 7 minutes for a mountain. And then the last irony, and he asked us to include it. Further down the Trishuli, in the towns that did get the warning in time, the message said, stay away from the river. Many people did the opposite. They walked to the banks. They gathered, they filmed, they watched the flood come through. Not out of defiance, out of curiosity, because nobody there had ever seen the river do this. A warning that arrives is not the same as a warning that is believed. That is the last piece of the system, and no sensor fixes it. And China? That morning, Chinese authorities did pass a warning to the Nepali side about rising water. It was about something else, something small enough to ignore, and it was ignored. It was not about this. The people in Gyirong, on the Tibetan side, had no more warning than the people in Timure. Hundreds are missing there too. Nobody in Nepal we spoke to blames them. The mountain hit both countries at once. Many of the missing on both sides were pilgrims. The road through Rasuwa and Gyirong is the overland route to Mount Kailash, sacred to Hindus and Buddhists, and late August is the season. One group from the Isha Foundation, about 80 people from the United States, Canada, Australia, Britain, Germany, and a dozen other countries, was standing in the immigration hall at Gyirong on its way home when the water came through the building. Another group of pilgrims from Tamil Nadu was on the road below Timure. About 20 of them made it to the police post. A day later, their founder, Sadhguru, was on the Tibetan side asking for permission to reach the town. That is why the missing list reads like a list of nations. 6. The day after. On Wednesday afternoon, while the search was still running, Nepal's Hydrology Department and the China Meteorological Administration held a virtual meeting. China agreed to inform Nepal as soon as water begins to rise on its side of the border. President Xi called for stronger monitoring and early warning systems. That is a good outcome. It is also 13 months late, and it is a promise, not a censor. And the promise was tested within a day. On Thursday morning, Chinese authorities told Nepal, through the Foreign Ministry, that the Lehende was blocked again at the site of Wednesday's collapse. A new lake had formed about 18 kilometers above the border, roughly 2 million cubic meters of water, already spilling over its rim, with up to 3 million more expected to flow into it over the following 3 days. Nepal's disaster authority confirmed it from satellite images and issued a special notice to everyone downstream, including the rescue teams. A second major flood is possible. Stay away from the river. So the warning system Nepal has today, the day after, is this: a phone call from Beijing, a satellite pass, and a notice, which is more than Timur had. It is still not a siren. That same Thursday, the Prime Minister was in Nuwakot. Balin Shah is 36. He has been in office for 5 months, swept in with a landslide after the youth protests of 2025 brought down the old political establishment. And this is the first disaster of his government. He went to the army center where families were waiting for news, told them the state was with them, and promised to do better. Our friend in Kathmandu believes him. He also said something else. If there had been information, this government would have used it. There was none to use, because this is not a Nepal problem. In 2022, researchers counted the glacial lakes across the Himalaya that sit above people and could break. More than 200 are rated very high hazard in Nepal, India, Pakistan, Bhutan, and China. Each one is a Lehende waiting for the right summer. 7. No anger. We asked our friend one last question. How does it feel in Nepal right now? Anger? People saying they knew this would happen? He wrote back 2 words, no anger, and then a lot of grief. That is where this video ends, because that is where the country is, not in blame. In a valley where the sirens are 100 kilometers away on a river with the same name, where the agreement that would have connected 2 countries sat unsigned for 13 months, and where the first warning most people got came from a phone in someone's hand at the border. The Lehende will flood again. The scientists have said so. The people below it deserve more than a promise. To everyone in Rasuwa, Nuwakot, and Gyirong, we are thinking of you.